suggesting, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, we only have 2,000 caregivers who are receiving honoraria of 20,000 kwacha per month against 36,000 caregivers who are working with children across Malawi in different ECD centers, and this covers a population of over 2 million children in Malawi. We also noted that the infrastructure is still a challenge in our ECD centers, and only 700 million has so far been allocated for infrastructure development when it comes to ECD. Therefore, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, your committee urges the ministry to explore alternative means of funding. And as your committee, we were even proposing that maybe if government can introduce a special levy that should be dedicated to be a funding to drive forward the issue of ECDs in Malawi, so that then we can bridge the gap that has been left by the donors. Minister of Local Government and Rural Development. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Local Government has been allocated 37.8 billion for the 2025-2026 financial year, a 32% increase from the previous year. The committee observed that many projects of the ministry, including the construction of the National Arts Center and the rehabilitation of the Blantyre Cultural Center, remain unfinished. The ministry also faces challenges in constructing chiefs' houses due to the rising costs of goods and services. Your cluster committee strongly advises the ministry to prioritize completion of unfinished projects. Additionally, we recommend that the Treasury should allocate additional resources to address the rising costs of construction and assure that the timely completion of these critical cultural and community projects are achieved. Again, we as your cluster committee, we also recommend for continuation of the devolving of funds from the central government to the local government. National Youth Council of Malawi. Madam Speaker, the National Youth Council of Malawi has seen a significant increase in the budgetary allocation, rising from 2.7 billion in 2024-2025 financial year to 4.3 billion, representing a 218% increase. Despite this increase, Madam Speaker, the Council still faced a budget cut during the mid-year budget review last year, which affected its ability to carry out planned activities, including the construction of the youth development centers across Malawi. Your cluster commends National Youth Council of Malawi for securing a 2 billion Youth Innovation Fund, and it is the cluster's wish that this fund should be used as according to its intended purpose, as we have seen the improvement or the implementation of the first implementation of such a program with the first 100 million that was given to the institution. However, we urge the Council to expedite the construction of youth centers and other projects aimed at youth development and empowerment. Additionally, we recommend that the Treasury should ensure consistent funding to avoid disruption in youth-focused initiatives. The 60th institution that, Madam Speaker, we discussed with was the Malawi National Council of Sports. The Malawi National Council of Sports has been allocated 12 billion for the 2025-2026 financial year, up from the 7 billion in the previous year. The committee observed that several projects, including the construction of BAT ground in Blantyre, remain incomplete due to insufficient funding. The Council also requires additional resources to prepare for the Commonwealth youth games. Your cluster recommends that extra resources be allocated to the Council to complete the ongoing projects, particularly the BAT ground. Additionally, we urge the Treasury to provide the necessary funding for the Council to participate in international sports events, which are crucial for the development of sports in Malawi. The Malawi Council for the Disability Affairs, Makoda. Madam Speaker, the Malawi Council for the Disability Affairs has been allocated 3 billion for the 2025-2026 financial year, representing a 5% increase from the previous year. The committee observed that the Council faces critical shortages in terms of staffing, with key positions such as the Director of Rehabilitation Service and the Director of Finance and Administration remaining unfilled since 2019. This has severely crippled the Council's ability to implement its programs effectively. We strongly recommend that the administrative structure of the Council be reviewed and all critical positions be filled urgently. Additionally, we urge the Treasury to allocate the 2.1 billion requested by the Council to ensure that the effective implementation of its planned activities, particularly those aimed at improving the lives of persons with disabilities. The other institution that your committee had a discussion with concerning the budget was the NGO Regulatory Authority. Madam Speaker, the NGO Regulatory Authority has been allocated 4.9 billion for the 2025-2026 financial year. However, the authority has indicated that these resources are insufficient to carry out their activities effectively, particularly in monitoring and regulating NGOs across the country. We recommend that the authority should prioritize its activities and develop a clear list of objectives to ensure the effective use of the already available resources. Additionally, we urge the Treasury to allocate 400 million requested for the operational costs and the procurement of vehicles to enhance the authority's mobility and the operational challenges. TVETA. It was noted during our discussion with TVETA that construction of technical colleges still remains critical. However, the non-compliance of paying of the TVETA levy by some private institution, and interestingly, the Malawi government itself, such that the government has accumulated arrears concerning the TVETA levy since it was established, such that at the moment, the arrears owed by the government to TVETA are actually in excess of 70 billion. Your committee recommends the government to honor its obligation according to the TVETA law, and in such that these funds are the ones which can now be used for construction of more technical colleges or community technical colleges across Malawi, and also ease some of the challenges that are being faced by TVETA itself. Kachere Rehabilitation Center. Madam Speaker, the Kachere Rehabilitation Center has been allocated 1.7 billion for the 2025-2026 financial year, up from 1.44 billion in the previous year. The committee noted with concern that the center faces critical funding challenges, which has affected its ability to provide rehabilitation services effectively. The center also requires additional resources to increase bed capacity and recruit specialized staff such as speech therapists. We strongly appeal to the Treasury to allocate additional resources to the center, considering its critical role in providing rehabilitation services to both privileged and underprivileged individuals. Specifically, we recommend funding for the recruitment of specialized staff and the expansion of the bed capacity to meet the growing demand for rehabilitation services. Last but not the least, Disability Trust Fund. We highly recommend the government for increasing the funding to the Disability Trust Fund from 200 million to 500 million in this current financial year. However, according to the demands that the Disability Trust Fund has, this money still looks inadequate. And the recommendation of the committee to just enable the enrolling of the activities of the Disability Trust Fund, we are asking the government to put an additional 1 billion to this funding. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, our cluster has identified critical areas that require immediate attention to ensure the effective implementation of social and community development programs across Malawi. From labor and youth development to disability affairs and local government, the recommendations we have presented today are aimed at addressing the challenges faced by these sectors and improving the lives of all Malawians. We strongly recommend the ministry, especially the Ministry of Finance, to pay special attention to the budgets that are aimed at addressing the vulnerable and marginalized groups of our society, such as children, persons with disabilities, the elderly, women, and the youth. We sincerely hope that the Treasury and the relevant ministries will take these recommendations into consideration as we work towards building a more inclusive and prosperous Malawi. Let me conclude by expressing my sincere gratitude to you, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, popularly known as Achakongwe, for giving me this opportunity to present this report. I would also like to thank all of the ministries, departments, and agencies for their cooperation and inputs during our deliberations. With these remarks, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, I thank you and the entire House for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, for representing the cluster. Honorable members, earlier on I did announce that we are remaining with the 3 clusters. That was just an oversight. They were 5, now we are remaining with 4 clusters. Yes, Honorable, which cluster is that? Trade. Cluster 10, Industry, Trade and Tourism and Media and Communications. Proceed, Honorable.
Madam Second Deputy Speaker, I rise before this House with great humility and responsibility to table the cluster report on behalf of Cluster 10, Trade, Industry, Tourism, and Media Information and Communications for the year 2025-2026. First and foremost, I extend my sincere gratitude to your office, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, for the solid support you gave our cluster during this work. Secondly, my heartfelt appreciation to the esteemed cluster members for their invaluable contributions and dedication to duty over the past 2 weeks. Furthermore, I extend gratitude to all controlling officers who diligently provided the necessary information during their presentations before the cluster. I applaud staff for the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs and the Secretariat team for their tireless efforts in providing technical and logistical support to the cluster. In a special way, I thank my co-chair, Chikwawa West, MP Honorable Susan Dorsey, for work well done. Last but not least, I would like to thank the people of Kasungu North-Northeast, especially Munyanja, Simulemba, and Chisempere for the continued trust they have in me as their representative in this House. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, your cluster analyzed vote 275 subvented organizations, which has trade and industry organizations which include Malawi Investment and Trade Center, MITC, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Institute, SMEDI, and the Competition and Fair Trading Commission, CFCT. In addition, the cluster also met with the Malawi Bureau of Standards, which does not appear in the budget, but is very important to the sector. Within budget vote 275, the Media and Information Subvented organizations comprised of the National Initiative for Civic Education Trust, the Malawi Broadcasting Corporation, and the Malawi Post Corporation. Despite not being part of the vote, the Malawi Communications Regulatory Authority also appeared before your cluster. Similarly, because of its importance to tourism, we also met the Malawi Gaming and Lotteries Authority, MAGLA, even though it does not appear in the government budget documents. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, other votes we were responsible for are vote 330, Ministry of Information and Digitization, vote 360, Ministry of Tourism, and vote 390, Ministry of Trade and Industry. I now present the key budget issues for each ministry and its state-owned enterprises as outlined above. We are mindful that in the medium term, the budget must be aligned with this administration's agriculture, tourism, mining, and manufacturing strategy. I turn to the key findings and resolutions in the spirit of ATAMM strategy. I start with the T in tourism, vote 360, Ministry of Tourism. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, tourism is one of the 4 top priority sector pillars in our ATMM development strategy. Reflecting this priority, in 2025-2026, your cluster was pleased to note that the Ministry of Tourism has been allocated more than double the revised allocation of 2024-2025 from 8.8 billion to 17.9 billion. However, your cluster was disappointed to learn that the ministry had serious funding challenges in the 2024-2025 fiscal year. As at the end of February 2025, just slightly above half of the expected funds were actually processed and utilized. That's 4.5 billion out of 8.8 billion, representing 51% of the money had been received. More worrisome is that the development budget was severely squeezed with only 3% being utilized. That is 46 million out of 1.3 billion that was supposed to be spent on the development budget. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, your cluster pleads with the Accountant General's Department to match funding priorities with the key development pillars, especially tourism, as it is an engine for generating foreign exchange. On the development budget for the Ministry of Tourism, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, we recognize that the key players in this sector are private entities. However, government must provide an enabling environment failing which private resources cannot flow into the sector. In particular, we request that the allocation of $6 billion on Part 2 of the development budget be provided in full over the course of the year for the Ministry of Tourism to implement its product development program as follows. Kasungu National Park, accommodation and supporting infrastructure to boost tourist spending, a budget of $1.9 billion. Public beaches, to develop model beaches as a blueprint for sustainable beach tourism along the lake shores of Malawi, $1.4 billion. Improving access roads to prime tourist sites, $1.2 billion. Completion of Mzuzu Malawi Institute of Tourism structures, $568 million. Construction of Malawi Institute of Tourism purpose-built facility at Lingazi Inn, an amount of $1 billion. We support that this money be given to the ministry in the course of the year because it will help them facilitate more tourism. In terms of the revenue budget for the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry of Tourism is selling 10 priority projects whose combined value is $151 million. Of these, 7 projects will follow a public-private partnership investment model at Likoma, Nkata Bay, Salima, Nkotakota, Mulanje, Machinga, and Mangochi. To address problems related to revenues, particularly leakages in foreign exchange earnings and non-compliance by tourism operators to pay tourism levy, the Ministry of Tourism will use ORT to fund the following destination marketing activities during 2025-2026 fiscal year. They will digitize the payment systems, spending $196 million for point-of-sale devices. They will enact the new tourism law, which provides for use of digitized payment systems, spending $188 million. They will roll out tourism statistics database to track tourist numbers and spend $223 million. And they will continue to provide waivers to indigenous Malawians who seek to construct rooms, 20 rooms or less within their eco-tourist lodges. More importantly, the ministry seeks to devolve tourism functions to the district councils, for which they need $175 million. We encourage that these resources be provided to the Ministry of Tourism. In the tourism industry, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, we have the Malawi Gaming and Lotteries Board, MAGRA. The gaming and the lotteries industry has 28 operators, with the majority in sports betting, 12 of them. Others are casinos, which are 5, national lotteries, which are 3, machine operators, which are 2, wide area progressive, which are 2, and radio raffles, 4 of them. The revenue budget for MAGLA is pegged at $17 billion that they will collect this 2025-2026 financial year, rising from $13.6 billion last year. The revenue is generated from gaming levy, lottery levy, sport betting levy, and license fees. The authority intends to remit dividends of $3 billion, which is about 50% of their surplus. The development budget for MAGLA consists of just one purpose-built office for smooth operations of the authority. They will use 50% that they have agreed with the Treasury to return part of the dividends that they are supposed to give to the Treasury to return for themselves and use for the offices. I now turn to the second M in the ATMM strategy, and this is manufacturing. Similar to tourism, manufacturing is one of the 4 priority pillars of the ATMM strategy. Vote 390, Ministry of Trade and Industry. Ministry of Trade and Industry is aligned to Malawi 2063 through the industrialization pillar and the private sector dynamism enabler. As an overview, the allocation towards Ministry of Trade and Industry has been increased by 242.45% from a revised estimate of 4 billion in 2024-2025 to 14 billion in 2025-2026. Your cluster was pleased with this allocation. Yet, the ministry still requires 11 billion to end up to a total of 25.7 billion in 2025-2026. In justifying these additional resource requirements, the ministry listed 21 activities that have been considered by your cluster. In these 11 billion, other recurrent transactions accounts for 8.6 billion. Your cluster considered these proposals alongside those contained in budget document number 5, program-based budget, central government, pages 473 to 480, which show underperformance on most of the indicators during the 2024-2025 fiscal year. Secondly, these same pages also show the targets for 2025-2026, for which the ministry had already budgeted within the 14.5 billion allocation for the year. Thirdly, there appears to be an overlap with its key state-owned enterprises, namely SMEDI and MITC. For these reasons, we recommend pending consideration of any additional resources to the ministry on the recurrent budget. We strongly urge MOTI to align resource allocations to achieving the program performance indicators and their targets as in Table 1 on pages 473 to 480. On the development budget for the Ministry of Trade and Industry, the ministry seeks an additional 2.6 billion on Part 2 of the development budget. The cluster approves this request, which will support 2 projects. A USA Development Fund-sponsored matching grants project, which requires an additional 1.4 billion kwacha in support of agribusinesses for SMEs. Without additional resources, the 2025-26 allocation of this project is 362 million. Since this is a matching grant where government contributes half and the USADF contributes another half, we recommend that government should provide its contribution, whatever decision the government of the USA will take on funding this project. The value chains development project requires an additional 1.23 billion kwacha. The current allocation in the 2026-2025 budget is 1 billion, and we recommend that these additional resources be provided to the Ministry of Trade. The revenue budget for Ministry of Trade comes from revenues that they collect from fees, levies, and penalties. As at February 2025, the ministry had more than achieved its 2024-2025 revenue ceiling, collecting 518 million kwacha against an expected 466 million kwacha. This we commend for every minister to try to achieve their revenue targets. But unfortunately, there is no information on the revenue target for 2025-2026 for the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Malawi Investment and Trade Center is one state-owned enterprise under the Ministry of Trade and Industry. MITC has been allocated 18.1% more resources than it was in 2024-2025, from 1.4 billion to 1.7 billion. MITC requested for additional resources to increase their allocation from the current 1.7 billion to 11.2 billion to support investment promotion, market access facilitation, export capacity development, and strategic sectoral investment mapping. Of this amount, 7 billion is for compensation reassessment, disclosure, and administration for Matindi and Dunduzu industrial parks. The cluster recommends the additional allocations as follows: 4 billion kwacha for a sewer system and 900 million kwacha for other investment promotion activities and a bridge at Chigumula Industrial Park to complete it so that it can be handed over to investors by July 2025. We also recommend that the 7 billion for Matindi and Dunduzu industrial parks be provided. On the revenue budget for MITC, MITC facilitated foreign direct investment worth 1.1 billion in 2024-25, and it expects to facilitate 1.2 billion in 2025, 1.2 billion US dollars in 2025 to 2026. In addition, it facilitated $160 million worth in exports and expects to increase this figure to 176 million US dollars in 2025-2026. This is a lot of income that MITC is bringing in. Other income that has been allocated to MITC is 3.6 billion, of which 1.9 billion is subvention funds and 1.7 billion is on generated revenues. Investors at Chigumula are expected to pump in 1.9 billion, 19 billion in 2025-2026. So we encourage that the government should pay its part to make sure that the Chigumula project is completed. SMEDI is allocated 240.5 more resources in 2025-2026 from 1.1 billion to 2.2 billion. Yet funding delays and misalignment with Treasury projections has hindered SMEDI's performance. The cluster requests 1.25 billion to support SME transformation and expansion initiatives. The cluster noted that SMEDI has a lot of responsibility for MSME indicators that are underperforming, as indicated in tables 6.1, pages 342 to 346 of program-based budget document number 5, submitted organizations. Lastly, on the Ministry of Trade, last but not least, on Ministry of Trade and Tourism, Malawi Bureau of Standards does not receive any budgetary allocation from government, but the cluster was informed that the annual revenue for collection for 2025-2026 has increased by 31% for a revised 22 billion to 29 billion that they will collect. The cluster also was informed that MBS will pay out dividend amounting to nearly 1 billion in 2025-2026, which is a decrease to what they provided in 2024-2025. And the decrease is on account of some revenue streams being affected due to the foreign exchange scarcity. Finally, under Ministry of Trade, we have Competition and Fair Trading Commission, which is allocated 1.5 billion in 2020, was allocated 1.5 billion in 2024-2025, but it has been revised downwards to 1.4 billion in mid-year and upwards again in 1.6 billion for 2025-2026. The committee was requested to advocate for considering restoration of the subvention ceiling to 1.84 billion. What happened was at the beginning of the financial year, they were told that they will receive 1.8 billion, but I think towards February, they were told that their allocation has been decreased by 181 million kwacha. We are requesting that we should just give them back this money because the program that is going to be affected includes enforcement of public price stabilization measures that they are taking part in. The media is the other pillar that we considered, the Ministry of Information and its state-owned enterprises. Ministry of Information was provided with in 2024-2025, was provided with 28 billion. In 2026, the budget has slightly increased to 29 billion. The cluster recommends an additional 8.2 billion to support ART, the College of ICT, and the digital migration project. On the development budget, Ministry of Information has one donor-funded project on Part 1, which is Digital Malawi, that requires has been allocated 15.5 billion in 2025-2026. And it has got 4 projects that require Part 2 allocations. And these projects are last mile rural connectivity, which requires 3.97 billion. NASIT, that's the Blantyre campus hostels, requires 1 billion, and the digital migration requires another 3.6 billion, which they will be able to install 13 broadcasting transmitters in 9 districts. Malawi Postal Corporations has also seen its allocation increased to 4.3 billion from 1.6 billion in 2024-25, reflecting a 162% rise. Despite this increase, the committee identified a funding gap in the turnaround strategy and recommends additional funding of 6.76 billion, comprising of 2 billion for the University Service Fund subvention and 4.76 billion earmarked for the turnaround strategy to enhance business expansion and service delivery. MPC believes they are a viable business. Malawi Broadcasting Corporation has seen its allocation increased by 91.5% from 5.8 billion to 11.1 billion, with a focus on rehabilitating infrastructure and supporting the elections. The cluster supports an additional 1.16 billion for completion of transmission infrastructures in some sites that they requested for. The National Initiative for Civic Education has been allocated 2.3 billion, which is 26% more than it received last year. The cluster noted that suspension of USAID funding poses a significant challenge to electoral education efforts. Further to this, there is a need for intensive civic education to ensure that NICE has a target of a voter turnout of 85%. Now, much of their education, civic education was going to be conducted using USAID funds. So we urge government to take up the gap that will be left by the USAID if that happens. There is a 31 million which will assist a trust to disseminate information specifically on the roles of members of parliament and councillors and other key actors in governance. So this 31 million maybe will be very useful for each member that is here if your constituents know exactly what your roles are as distinct from those of councillors. MACRA has a revenue budget, but MACRA does not receive funding from government, but the authority will generate 56 billion from license fees, annual levy, frequency fees, and type approval fees. In 2025-26, MACRA plans to give government a dividend of 13 billion. On the development budget for MACRA, it has allocated 14 billion to the following activities: technology and systems enhancements for regulatory and system compliance, including type approval, SIM card re-registration, and data protection amounting to 10 billion. We were told that there are 15 million SIM cards, and all those 15 million SIM cards will be re-registered this year. They're also planning on building and infrastructure investments for new MACRA offices, which are likely to be headquartered in Mvera, in the secondary cities at Mvera. And they are looking for 3 billion for starting the work on those offices, and some district offices and regional offices across the country. They are also doing a national address system. This is about the plot numbers and street numbers, and they require 1.2 billion to complete that. On the development budget, a significant project is called Connect a School, where they are going to spend 7.4 billion to construct internet laboratories. These laboratories are earmarked for all the 193 constituencies, but as of now, they have done 75, and they are remaining with the difference. Their request is if government could match the 7.4 billion, then they can speed up the provision of these laboratories to the 193 schools. In conclusion, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, this report underscores the need for a strategic approach in budgetary allocations to maximize the economic potential of our trade, industry, tourism, media, and communications sectors as the backbone sectors to socio-economic development. The cluster strongly urges the House to adopt the recommendations contained in this report and to ensure financial sustainability, enhance service delivery, and economic transformation in line with Malawi's long-term development aspirations. Madam Speaker, this cluster is a cluster that is for generating revenues, generating forex. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, I now move that the House should consider and note the report for cluster number 10, and I beg to move that the Ministry of Finance should take serious consideration in the proposals for readjustment to the budget that the cluster has made. I beg to move.
Thank you very much, Chair, for that report from Cluster 10, Industry, Trade and Tourism, and Media and Communications. Who is next? Honorable Chair, to present a report from Cluster 5, Education, Science and Technology. Proceed. May I have this mic switched off?
Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, I'm humbled to stand before the August House this afternoon to present a report of the Parliamentary Cluster number 5 of Education, Science and Technology upon considering and scrutinizing institutions that are contained in 3 votes in the
2025-2026 national budget, namely vote 250, Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education, vote 251, Ministry of Higher Education, and vote 275, subvented organizations that includes Malawi National Examination Board, Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, National Council of Higher Education, National Commission for Science and Technology, Malawi University of Science and Technology, National Library Services, Higher Education Students Loans and Grants Board, Malawi Institute of Education, University of Malawi, Malawi University of Business and Applied Sciences, Kamuzu University of Health Sciences, Malawi College of Health Sciences, Malawi University Development Program, and Nzuzu University. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, you may wish to note that your cluster on education, science, and technology met with controlling officers of various institutions in the education sector in their budget allocations in the 2025-2026 financial year, and I therefore present the findings and recommendations as follows. Vote 250, Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education. Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, in the 2025-2026 financial year, the overall budget for the vote 250 is 359.275 billion Malawi kwacha, which represents a 4% increase from the revised allocation of 345.819 billion in the 2024-2025 financial year. The overall education sector budget has been allocated 1.3 trillion in the 2025-2026 financial year. In the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education budget, the current budget is at 165.359 billion Malawi kwacha, and the development budget is at 193.914 billion in the 2025-2026 financial year. Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, the ministry requires additional resources amounting to 3 billion Malawi kwacha for preparatory activities to introduce preparatory class and basic education, and 3 billion Malawi kwacha for teaching, learning materials under basic education. The ministry further requires an additional 3 billion Malawi kwacha to cater for the procurement of gadgets for implementation of virtual science laboratories, 1.85 billion for smooth coordination of all support services, 2 billion Malawi kwacha to complement the donor funding for tablet-based learning, and 10.2 billion to complete construction projects under Development Part 2 projects. Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam, with the shortfalls that I have presented, your cluster committee recommended as follows. The ministry be allocated additional resources amounting to 3 billion Malawi kwacha for preparatory activities to introduce preparatory class under basic education. The ministry be allocated 3 billion Malawi kwacha for teaching and learning materials under basic education. The ministry be allocated 3 billion Malawi kwacha to cater for the procurement of gadgets for implementation of virtual science laboratories. The ministry be allocated 1.85 billion Malawi kwacha for smooth coordination of all support services, and the ministry be allocated 2 billion Malawi kwacha to complement the donor funding for tablet-based learning. Lastly, the ministry be allocated 10.2 billion kwacha to complement construction projects and developments. Vote 251, Ministry of Higher Education. Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, in the 2025-2026 financial year, the overall budget for Vote 251 is 78.636 billion Malawi kwacha. In the Ministry of Higher Education budget, the recurrent budget is at 17.534 billion, and the drawn budget is at 61.102 billion Malawi kwacha. Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, being a new ministry, the ministry is committed to building a knowledge-based Malawian society, producing graduates with a culture of innovation, entrepreneurship, and creativity, which speaks to pillar number 1 of the Malawi 2063 Human Capital Development. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, in order to achieve this, the ministry requires additional resources amounting to 1.2 billion Malawi kwacha for procurement of vehicles, for teacher training colleges and operations, and 500 million kwacha for finalization of curriculum review for teacher training colleges, including rollout of diploma programs. The ministry also requires 800 million Malawi kwacha additional resources for teacher training colleges and Domasi and Nalikule colleges of education to cater for increased costs of utilities and catering, and 200 million kwacha for accreditation process for Nalikule and Domasi College of Education. There is need for 1 billion kwacha for special fund for institutions to compete on scaling up and commercialization of research products responding to Malawi 2063 agenda. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, with the shortfalls that I have presented, your cluster recommended as follows. The ministry be allocated additional resources amounting to 1.2 billion for procurement of vehicles for teacher training colleges and operations. The ministry be allocated 500 million kwacha for finalization of curriculum review for teacher training colleges, including rollout of diploma programs. The ministry be allocated additional funding of 800 million kwacha for teacher training colleges and Domas and Nalikule colleges of education to cater for increased costs of utilities and also catering. The ministry be allocated 20 million kwacha for accreditation process for Nalikule and Domas College of Education. And lastly, the ministry be allocated 1 billion kwacha for special fund for institutions to compete on scaling up and commercialization of research products responding to Malawi 2063 agenda. Vote number 275, subvented organizations. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, let me now take you through institutions in the education sector that are subvented through vote 275. Malawi National Examination Board, MANEB. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, in the 2025-2026 financial year, MANEB has a total budget of 33.956 billion. In this budget, subvention is at 10.133 billion, which represents a 73% growth from last year's 11.638 billion. Madam Speaker, MANEB has a deficit of 3.581 billion from the previous financial year, and they have a deficit of 3.316 billion in the 2025-2026 financial year. With this deficit, MANEB, Madam Speaker, will not be able to conduct 2025 national examinations. Your cluster committee, Madam Deputy Speaker, therefore recommend that MANEB should be allocated 3.51 billion from the previous financial year and 3.316 billion deficit in the 2025-2026 financial year. National Council for Higher Education, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, in the 2025-2026 financial year, National Council for Higher Education had a budget of 2 billion, which would come from government subvention. They have a deficit of 1.81 billion Malawi kwacha. With the deficit, they will have numerous shortfalls, among them being not able to conduct assessment for registration and accreditation, quality assurance, capacity building, minimum body of knowledge, and validation of qualifications. Your cluster committee, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, recommended that the National Council for Higher Education should be allocated additional funds amounting to 1.810 billion to allow the institution to carry out most of its core functions. National Commission for Science and Technology has a total budget of 1.918 billion in the 2025-2026 financial year, which is 18.1% increase from last year's 1.624 billion Malawi kwacha. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, your cluster committee noted that NCST requested for 300 million Malawi kwacha for functional review, matched grant funding of 850 million kwacha, which will attract the equivalent in US dollars, 402 million for 3 motor vehicles, 57 million Malawi kwacha to develop the strategic plan, and also 2 billion for capitalization of science and technology fund and to support the national research agenda. With this background, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, your cluster recommended the following: additional funding of 300 million for functional review, matched grant funding of 850 million kwacha, which will attract equivalent amount in US dollars, 402 million for 3 motor vehicles, 57 million Malawi kwacha to develop the strategic plan, 2 billion Malawi kwacha for capitalization of science and technology fund, and also to support the national research agenda. National Library Services. The National Library Services has been allocated 1.54 billion Malawi kwacha in the 2025-2026 financial year, which is an increase from last year's 1.3 billion. The cluster, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, noted that National Library Services requirement for 2025-2026 financial year was 3.64 billion. They have a funding gap of 2.1 billion. The funding deficit comprises of the following: 200 million required for implementation of MIP1 interventions, which is e-library, 250 million Malawi kwacha for the procurement of books, 202 million for staff and benefits, 500 million for binding equipment, 30 million kwacha for board of directors expenses, 300 million for maintenance of buildings, 500 million for official vehicles for national librarian and deputy national librarian, and 97 million for other additional administrative expenses. Your cluster, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, recommended for the provision of a funding gap of 2.1 billion that would go towards the underfunded programs. Higher Education Students Loans and Grants Board. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, key changes in the Higher Education Students Loans and Grants Board budget includes the increase in students loans funding from 24 billion in the 2024-25 financial year to 36 billion Malawi kwacha in the 2025-2026 financial year. There is also an increase in government subvention of funding from 3.127 billion in 2024-2025 financial year to 5.679 billion in the 2025-2026 financial year, representing an increase of 81.6%. Higher Education Science Loans and Grants Board has a funding gap of 2.3 billion kwacha for the 2025-2026 ORT budget to cover for the funding deficit in the administration of Students' Loan Fund. The cluster recommends for the allocation of additional resources of 2.5 billion Malawi kwacha to cover the deficit as presented. Malawi Institute of Education. In the 2025-2026 financial year, Malawi Institute of Education has a total budget of 5.729 billion Malawi kwacha. This represents a 43% increase from the 2024-2025 revised allocation of 4.002 billion kwacha. Malawi Institute of Education ORT deficit of 77.99 billion kwacha for printing and distribution of teachers and learners workbook, orientation of curriculum implementers and managers, development and distribution of syllabus for primary and secondary, and developing teaching guide for TVET and development deficit of 6.537 billion Malawi kwacha. The cluster recommended, therefore, that Malawi Institute of Education should be allocated the shortfall of 77.992 billion and the development deficit of 6.537 billion Malawi kwacha. Allow me, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, to take you through the public universities. The University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, Luana. Luana has a total debt budget of 42.391 billion in the 2025-2026 financial year. In the budget, 31.669 billion is the current budget and 10.421 billion is capital budget. Your cluster, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, noted that Luana is making greater efforts to promote fertilizer production and seed development to help transform Malawi's agriculture landscape. There is need for additional 14.521 billion, which comprises of 2.5 billion on the Mega Farms project, 4 billion Malawi kwacha for skills development project, 321 million additional financing for construction of gateway administration and teaching complex, funding to complete and finish the construction of the ODL Center in Area 47, which is at 92%, and 10.7 billion for capacity expansion program. The education cluster, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, therefore recommend that Treasury should allocate additional funding of 14.521 billion. Malawi University of Science and Technology, MUST, in the 2025-2026 financial year, MUST has been allocated 20.644 billion kwacha as government salvation, representing a 36.6% increase from the previous year's 15.11 billion kwacha. The cluster on education noted that the university failed to pay the contractor for purpose-built lab 6.3 billion in the 2024-2025 financial year. Currently, Treasury has allocated 3 billion kwacha, but the university requires an additional 3.3 billion to pay the contractor. Certificates are already submitted. It further noted that there is need for an additional 1.5 billion Malawi kwacha for the teaching hospital to facilitate installation of hospital equipment, which has been procured by the Chinese government and will be in the country in the next 4 months. The total deficit is 4.8 billion Malawi kwacha. The cluster, therefore, recommend for the allocation of additional resources amounting to 4.8 billion to cover this shortfall. University of Malawi, UNIMA. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, UNIMA has been allocated a government subvention of 32.881 billion in the 2025-2025 financial year. In this budget, 28.581 billion is government recurrent subvention and 3.360 billion is capital budget. The cluster observed that the total ideal budget for the ORT subvention was projected at 54.179 billion against the final ceiling of 25.149 billion kwacha. The university needs additional 15.703 billion personal emoluments, 14.8 billion deficit for capital and operational expenses, 10.7 billion. This includes 4.1 billion uncleared certificates for the development budget, Thus, for clearance of certificates, completion of administration block, and prefabricated classrooms, and 1.55 billion for patient arrears for the past 6 months. It is against these findings, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, that your cluster committee recommends that UNIMA should be allocated additional funds as follows: 15.7 billion for personal emoluments, 10.7 for the development budget, 1.55 billion for payment of patient arrears. Zuzu University. Zuzu University has a total government subvention of 22.572 billion in the 2025-2026 financial year, which is 16.21% higher than the previous year. The cluster, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, noticed that there is a need for 12.5 billion, comprising of 1 billion kwacha for 100% completion construction of the university library, 4 billion for furniture, and 4 billion for books and equipment and hostel constructions, which requires an additional 3.5 billion Malawi kwacha for expected works. The cluster recommends that the university be allocated 12.5 billion Malawi kwacha, being the deficit. Malawi University of Business and Applied Sciences, MUBAS. MUBAS, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, has budgeted for 40.598 billion Malawi kwacha in the 2025-2026 financial year. This represents a 55% increase in allocation from the revised allocation of 26.252 billion in the 2024-2025 financial year. The cluster noted that the MUBAS has a wage bill and operations gap of 5.9 billion Malawi kwacha. The cluster recommended for Treasury to allocate ceiling of 5.9 billion additional funding to MUBAS to cover for the shortfall. Kamu's University of Health Sciences, KUHES. In the 2025-2026 financial year, KUHES has a government subvention of 27.988 billion Malawi kwacha, which represents a 38.65 increase from previous year. The recurrent, that's general transfer, has been allocated 24.672 billion, recurrent, that's service gratuity, 2.66 billion, and the capital budget is 7.942 billion. The committee observed that the university has a shortfall of wage bill of 11.3 billion, operational and capital expenditure of 27.1 billion, 7 billion kwacha shortfall on admin block, and 3.5 billion on skills lab, and 0.821 billion on the mutual student hostel, which is a contractual agreement. The cluster, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, recommended that the government should allocate resources towards the following: 11.3 billion for wage bill, 7 billion shortfall on administration block, 3.5 billion on skills lab, and 0.821 billion on the mutual student hostel, 27.1 billion operational and capital expenditure. Malawi University's Development Program. In the 2025-2026 financial year, MUDEP has been allocated a subvention of 444.88 million for ORT, which is an 18.1% increase from the revised 379.917 million in the 2024-2025 financial year. They have been allocated 3 billion Malawi kwacha as development budget from the revised 568 million in the 2024-2025 financial year. Malawi College of Health Sciences. In the 2025-2026 financial year, Malawi College of Health Sciences has been allocated 2.93 billion Malawi kwacha in the 2025-2026 financial year. This allocation represents a 48% increase from the 2024-25 revised estimates of 1.982 billion Malawi kwacha. The cluster also noted that the college requires 2 billion Malawi kwacha for the construction of office blocks, classrooms, library, and lecture theater. But there is a need for a new assessment to be done to determine the new cost of the projects. The cluster recommend that their budget be revised to include the additional 2 billion deficit. In conclusion, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, Madam, on behalf of the Education and Science Cluster Committee, let me sincerely thank you for your untiring support for the Parliamentary Cluster Committee system. In the same vein, I wish to express my utmost gratitude to the members of the Cluster Number 5, the Education, Science and Technology, for their dedication and hard work. Your Cluster Committee would like to recommend all the controlling officers who use their limited resources prudently. I would like also to applaud the universities who are going out of their core duties to create assets that are generating resources to complement their budgets. With these few remarks, I hereby beg to move, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, that the report be noted by the House. I beg to move. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Chair. Honorable members, that was a report from Cluster 5, Education, Science and Technology.
Yeah.
Honorable Chair for Cluster 9, Commissions, Statutory Authorities and State Enterprises and Public Appointments. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'll present from here. Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, for giving me the floor to present the report of Cluster 9, comprising members of the Public Appointments Committee and the Committee on Commissions, State Cooperation and State Enterprises. Madam Deputy Speaker, over the past 2 weeks, this cluster had interaction with controlling officers from various government MDAs and considered budgets for foreign votes. Madam Deputy Speaker, it was clear from the discussions that there is an overwhelming need for more resources. However, the public purse can only accommodate so much. As such, I will present only the critical issues that need addressing in this budget. Vote 090, Office of the President Cabinet. Madam Deputy Speaker, the approved revised budget for the Office of President Cabinet for the 2024-25 financial year was 41.3 billion, comprising 28.2 billion ORT and 12.6 billion government budget beside personal emoluments. However, what was disappointing was that out of the 12 billion development budget for science, IDAI obviously only used 7 billion, representing 56 utilization%. This is the case with the country, while the country had not fully recovered from the effects of the cyclone. In 2025-2026 budget, the vote has been allocated 54.32 billion, comprising 7.86 billion for PE, 29.1 billion for RT, and 15.3 billion for development. Of interest, the vote has been allocated 15.3 billion, comprising 14.3 billion for cyclone, IDAI, and 1 billion for rehabilitation of civil stadium. The cluster noted that while 1 billion was allocated for civil stadium, The stadium was allocated 500 million in the previous financial year for the same purpose. Furthermore, the stadium benefited from the regional 5 games. The committee noted with concern that the budget for the Department of Disaster Management Affairs was reduced from 5.1 billion to 2.8 billion. This drastic reduction, Madam Deputy Speaker, is extremely worrisome. When asked, the officials from OBC stated that DOTMA would also draw from the vote on unforeseen expenditure. However, the vote for unforeseen expenditure has also been reduced. The question is what will happen if a disaster befalls this country. The previous cyclones already exposed the lack of preparedness by the government in dealing with disasters. Why then further reduce the allocation, the capacity of the already weak disaster management and the response teams in the country? Will the minister explain where the money for the disaster management will come from, if not from this vote? Madam Deputy Speaker, the cluster noted that the budget for BC does not include the budget for the central government stores, currently called the Department of Procurement and Supply Services. This department manages officers from the procurement, common services, and stock suppliers so that the MDAs can procure from them in the manner similar to the central medical stores. An engagement with the department revealed that the government committed to recapitalize the department by 5 billion kwacha over a period of 10 years, representing 500 million kwacha per financial year. However, government only honored the commitment for 2 financial years since 2021, since 2020-21 financial year. The use of the department has an effect of providing an agent, for small institutions with limited financial and technical abilities to procure office supplies. Furthermore, the department offers competition prices that can help stabilize prices on the market by providing a steady alternative for MDAs. Currently, the department has huge demand from secondary schools, for schools and other small institutions that find the department as a convenient alternative to private suppliers. Furthermore, the department faces payment challenges where government runs into cash flow challenges because the payments to the government departments are intergovernmental. The cluster recommends as follows: government should, as a matter of policy, relook at the disaster management and the response mechanism in this country and how funds for disaster response can be financed. Government should remove 800 million from the allocation to civil stadium and allocate it to Office of the Disaster of Public Officer Declaration. I will explain later why these funds would be used for this one. Government should also reconsider honoring the commitment to recapitalize the central government stores and review its policy to clearly identify the niche of the department in the current procurement legal framework. Vote 099, public procurement and disposal of assets. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, during the previous budgets, the cluster has repeatedly called on the government to stop circumventing this vote, given the potential that PBDA has to generate resources. After government stopped circumventing this vote, Madam Second Deputy Speaker, the cluster is impressed with how EVDA has operated independently and even registering surpluses in terms of resources. The cluster recommends that government should utilize the surplus from PBDA to increase allocation to the following votes: National Statistics Office, 300 billion, and the Malawi, 300 million, and the Malawi Human Rights Commission, 200 million. Vote for 30 Malawi Human Rights Commission. Madam Secretary Speaker, Madam, this vote has been increased marginally from 3.5 to 3.8 billion. The major problem with
Honorable members,
Speaker,
order.
is that this House...
No, I understand. I understand it's because of the lights.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that the House increased the mandate for the Commission without corresponding the resources. This particularly on the new mandate relating to the address to information, access to information. This is why the committee has recommended that 200 million kwacha has to be drawn from PBDA surplus and added to this vote. This, Madam Speaker, is to enable the Commission to replace the very old fleet of vehicles and have some funds for the matter relating to the Access to Information Act. Vote for 60 Malawi Electoral Commission. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, the Malawi Electoral Commission did not have serious budget challenges. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, the Commission budget has from 102.9 billion in 2024-25 to 174 billion in the forthcoming year. The reasons for the increase are obvious, considering that this is an election year. The committee wishes to advise Treasury to timely fund the Commission and address the budgetary challenges to ensure that we have a smooth election. Vote 275, National Statistics Office. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, the National Statistics Office is an extremely important institution as it provides data used in planning various socio-economic interventions. If the data is unreliable, the intervention will also be unreliable. Madam Secretary Speaker, this office has been perennially victim of low budget. Even where the low budget is provided, the office hardly gets the funding. However, this year, Madam Deputy Speaker, the cluster is pleased to report that the vote has been increased by 111%. Though the funds may not address all the challenges rising from the low budget suffered over a long period, this increase is welcome. However, the National Statistics Office will, in coming financial year, conduct a number of important surveys where government is required to provide counterpart funding, which is not adequately provided. The cluster, therefore, it recommends that 300 million kwacha be drawn from the surplus from PPDA to cover the deficit of this vote. Vote number 240, Office of the Vice President. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, the budget under this vote has decreased from a revised provision of 8.3 billion kwacha in 2024-25 financial year to 8.1 billion kwacha in the current proposed estimates. It is worth noting, though, that the vote was revised from 4.6 billion to 8.3 billion, which was a huge increase. This may explain the marginal decrease. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, the Office of the Vice President requires additional resources to maintain the area 12 residents and procure 4 motor vehicles for the convoy of the Vice President. It is critical, Madam Speaker, that these requirements be looked into to adequately facilitate the office maintenance of area 12 residents. It requires 1.2 billion, while the procurement of the motor vehicles require 800 million kwacha. These resources have not been included in this provision for this year. Vote 50050, state residences. Madam Second Deputy Speaker, the approved allocation to this vote in the 2024-2025 budget was 43 billion, which was revised to 60.6 billion at the mid-year. In the proposed estimates, the vote has been allocated 67 billion. The cluster wishes to commend the state residences for the rehabilitation works that have been undertaken with funds allocated for the past 2-3 years. The cluster wishes to encourage state residences to utilize the capital budget in the proposed estimates effectively to improve the condition of our state residences. Vote 061, Office of Director, Public Resources, Public Delegation. Before I talk about the budget for this vote, allow me, Madam Deputy Speaker, to remind the House of what the cluster stated last year relating to the significance of this office. Madam Deputy Speaker, this office is one of the critical institutions in terms of prevention and detection of corruption, of illicit enrichment by public officers. But our focus has been often on prosecuting institutions which come in after corruption has already taken place and services have already been denied. Madam Deputy Speaker, the cluster was informed that until 1924, government had a systematic mandatory induction and promotion training regime for public servants. This was made possible through the coordination role of the Department of Human Resource Management and Development and other central government agencies that were responsible for managing respective common service staff. And would be confirmed.
Order, honorable members, order.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm bringing the steps.
Honorable, proceed, please.
Yes, I'm proceeding. Yeah, so I'm on the Department of Human Resource Management and Development. Madam Deputy Speaker, the major challenge on this vote relates to the ability of the department to build capacity of the civil service to levels that can ignite acceptable levels of performance. We have all cried that the quality of service in the public service has gone down. And this is the vote that would help address the challenges. The committee observed that the vote did not plan for the training, but only focused on recruitment rather than training civil servants. The cluster also was informed that up until 2024, government had a systematic mandatory induction and promotion training regime to public servants. This was made possible through the coordinating role of the department and other critical government agencies that were responsible for managing mandatory inductions on promotional training programs. Central government agencies were adequately funded and were able to send their staff for mandatory training. However, after 1994, there was policy shift and decisions for training budgets were decentralized from central government agencies to MDS. Madam Deputy Speaker, because of my side problems, in conclusion, let me thank you. Let me thank you, your office, and also let me thank all MDS. But also, most importantly, for another section, which have been said, the Minister of Finance, because of the coordination and also the cooperation that he cooperated with this cluster on a very important vote, the vote for the National Assembly. We have to say thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister, and we thank also your team, the ST, the Director of Budget, and everybody, including also the COP here, and also the other departmental heads for National Assembly. But also let me thank the co-chair of this cluster, Member of Parliament for Majinga South, and all members of Parliament for the active participation that they took in sorting out some of the important issues specifically for National Assembly. And let me thank you all for listening to this poor presentation. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, for that report from Cluster 9. Honorable members, we are remaining with one cluster report only. May I suggest that we finish thereafter, the leader will guide us. Honorable Chair for Cluster 1, that's agriculture and irrigation and natural resources and climate change. Do you want to speak from there?
Madam Second Deputy Speaker, for reasons beyond the control of the cluster, which were communicated to the office of the Speaker, the report is not yet ready. I wouldn't want to divulge the reasons in this House, because they have been communicated to the office of the Speaker. Thank you.
All right, noted, Honorable. Honorable Leader.
Right, Honorable Speaker, we have listened attentively to cluster reports today, and I also wanted to say that when you listen to the reports, you would actually salute the chairs and the members for the wonderful job they have done. It's a great job, and the whole reason why we want Parliament to continue is because we have already built the capacity of these members. And if new members come in, they have to be trained again. So it's good that we should continue, so that come next year, we should be able to continue from where we have stopped. Otherwise, we can all testify that these reports are well crafted, and it means people indeed went to do their job in the cluster. And looking at our time, if we go for a healthy break and come back, we may be tempted to start debate on the budget, but at the same time, we are remaining with natural resources and agriculture. I therefore like to beg to move that we adjourn early today for us to have a very good look of what we can do tomorrow. And tomorrow, Madam, when we have moved the motion, we'll announce what we should be able to do tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. We have a motion before us, and the motion is asking the House for an early adjournment. Those of that opinion say aye. Those of the contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it, the motion is carried. Leader, did you say you will guide on the business tomorrow?
But tomorrow, before we go for reports, we'll allow the member for Chitipa South to present a cluster report. Thereafter, we shall go for reports, and time permitting, we will start individual budget comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Thank you very much for your participation. And I now adjourn the House to tomorrow, Wednesday, at 14 hours. I wish you a peaceful night. House adjourned.
Well, that's how the House has concluded its business today, Tuesday, 18th of March, 2025. A recap of business in the chamber. 7 cluster committees have presented their responses to the National Budget Statement under Government Business. These cluster committees are International Relations, Defense and Security Cluster Committee, Legal Affairs and Government Assurances Cluster Committee, Public Accounts and Budget Cluster Committee, Social and Community Affairs and Local Authorities and Rural Development Cluster Committee, Industry, Trade and Tourism and Media Information and Communications Cluster Committee, Education, Science and Technology Cluster Committee, and Public Appointments and Commissions Statutory Authorities. Earlier, 4 ministries took questions from members, and these ministries are Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Lands, and Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education. Some of the members that asked questions are those representing Mangochi Central, Zomba Likangala, Nsanje North, Lilongwe Mpenu Nkhoma, as well as Nkhotakota Central, among others. The second Deputy Speaker, Honorable Aisha Adams MP, has since adjourned the House to tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. Pamenepo ndi pamapeto pazokambirana za aphungu a Nyumba ya Malamulo lero lachiwiri pa 18 March 2025, tingokumbutsana zina mwa zomwe aphungu akambirana mnyumbayi lero. Kumbali ya boma, magulu asanu ndi awiri 7 amakomiti a Nyumba ya Malamulo apereka malipoti amakomiti mwawo atatha kuunika ndondomeko ya chuma cha boma ya 2025-2026 kwa sabata ziwiri. Makomitiwa ndi komiti yoona za maubale a dziko lino ndi maiko ena ndi chitetezo cha dziko, komiti yoona za malamulo ndi kuonetsetsa kuti boma likukwaniritsa ntchito yake, komiti ya momwe boma limagwiritsira ntchito chuma chake, komiti yoona za chisamaliro cha anthu ndi maboma ang'onoang'ono ndi chitukuko cha kumidzi, komiti yoona za mafakitale, malonda ndi zokopa alendo ndi ntchito zofalitsa mauthenga, komiti yoona za maphunziro ndi komiti yoona momwe boma limalembera anthu ogwira ntchito. Ndipo aphungu anafunsa mafunso ku maunduna anayi. Maunduna awa ndi unduna wa zaulimi, unduna wa zaumoyo, unduna oona za malo ndi unduna oona za maphunziro a primary ndi secondary. Aphungu omwe anafunsa mafunsowa ndi oyimirira madera a Mangochi Central, Zomba Likangala, Nsanje North, Lilongwe Mpenu Nkhoma, komanso Nkhotakota Central mwa ena. Pakadali pano achiwiri kwa achiwiri a Speaker a Nyumba ya Malamulo olemekezeka a Aisha Adams MP ayimitsa zokambirana mnyumbayi kuti aphungu adzakumanenso mawa lachitatu nthawi ya 2 koloko masana. M'malo mwa anzanga onse kuno ku Parliament Television munali ndi ine Rachel Gonani.